Hello and welcome back everybody. Today we're going to talk about creepy forest encounters. Before we start with the video, I just want to tell you, if you enjoy my videos, please make sure to like and subscribe the channel. So, let's begin. The first story, or stories, have the title, I'm a search and rescue officer for the US Forest Service. I have some stories to tell. I wasn't sure where else to post these stories, so I figured I'd share them here. I've been an SAR officer for a few years now, and along the way I've seen some things that I think you guys might be interested in. I have a pretty good track record for finding missing people. Most of the time they just wander off the path or slip down a small cliff and they can't find their way back. The majority of them have heard the old say, "Stay where you are" thing, and they don't wander far, but I've had 2 cases where that didn't happen. Both bothered me a lot, and I used them as motivation to search even harder on the missing person cases I get called on. The first was a little boy who was out berry picking with his parents. He and his sister were together and both of them went missing around the same time. Their parents lost sight of them for a few seconds, and in that time both the kids apparently wandered off. When their parents couldn't find them, they called us and we came out to search the area. We found the daughter pretty quickly, and when we asked where her brother was, she told us that he'd been taken away by the bear men. She said he gave her berries and told her to stay quiet, that he wanted to play with her brother for a while. The last she saw of her brother, he was riding on the shoulders of the bear man, and he seemed calm. Of course, our first thought was abduction, but we never found a trace of another human being in that area. The little girl was also insistent that he wasn't a normal man, but that he was tall and covered in hair, like a bear, and that he had a weird face. We searched the area for weeks. It was one of the longest calls I've ever had been on, but we never found a single trace of that kid. The other one was a young woman who was out hiking with her mom and grandpa. According to the mother, her daughter had climbed up the tree to get a better view of the forest, and she'd never come back down. They waited at the base of the tree for hours, calling her name before they called for help. Again, we searched everywhere, and we never found a trace of her. I have no idea where she could possibly have gone, because neither her mother or her grandpa saw her come down. A few times I've been out on my own, searching with the canine, and they've tried to lead me straight up cliffs. Not hills, not even rock faces. Straight, sheer cliffs with no possible handholds. It's always baffling, and in those cases we usually find the person on the other side of the cliff or miles away from where the canine led us. I'm sure there's an explanation, but it's sort of strange. One particularly sad case involved the recovery of a body. A 9-year-old girl fell down the embankment and got impaled on a dead tree at the base. It was a completely freak accident, but I'll never forget the sound of her mother when we told her what happened. She saw the body bag being loaded into the ambulance, and she let out the most haunting, heartbroken wail I've ever heard. It was like her whole life was crashing down around her, and a part of her had died with her daughter. I heard from another SAR officer that she killed herself a few weeks after it happened. She couldn't live with the loss of her daughter. I was teamed up with another SAR officer because we'd received reports of bears in the area. We were looking for a guy who hadn't come home from a climbing trip when he was supposed to, and we ended up having to do some serious climbing to get to where we figured he'd be. We found him trapped in a small crevice with a broken leg. It was not pleasant. He'd been there for almost 2 days and his leg was very obviously infected. We were able to get him into a chopper, and I heard from one of the EMTs that the guy was absolutely inconsolable. He kept talking about how he'd been doing fine, and when he'd gotten to the top, a man had been there. He said the guy had no climbing equipment and he was wearing a parka and ski pants. He walked up to the guy, and when the guy turned around, he saw he had no face. It was just blank. He freaked out and ended up trying to get off the mountain too fast, which is why he'd fallen. He said he could hear the guy all night climbing down the mountain and letting out these horrible muffled screams. That story bothered the hell out of me. I'm glad I wasn't there to hear it. One of the scariest things I have ever happened to me involved the search for a young woman who'd gotten separated from her hiking group. We were out until late night because the dogs had picked up her scent. When we found her, she was curled up on a large rotten log. She was missing her shoes and pack, and she was clearly in shock. She didn't have any injuries, and we were able to get her walking with us to base ops. Along the way, she kept looking behind us and asking us why that big man with black eyes was following us. We couldn't see anyone, so we just wrote it off as some weird symptom of shock. But the closer we got to base, the more agitated that woman got. She kept asking me to tell him to stop making faces at her, and at one point she stopped and turned around and started yelling into the forest, saying that she wanted him to leave her alone. She wasn't going to go with him, she said, and she wouldn't give us to him. We finally got her to keep moving, but we started hearing these weird noises coming from all around us. It was almost like coughing, but more rhythmic and deeper. It was almost insect-like. I don't really know how else to describe it. When we were inside of base ops, the woman turns to me and her eyes are about as wide as I can imagine a human could open them. She touches my shoulder and says, "He says to tell you to speed up. He doesn't like looking at the scar on your neck." I have a very small scar on the base of my neck, but it's mostly hidden under my collar, and I have no idea how this woman saw it. Right after she says it, I hear that weird coughing right in my ear, and I just about jumped out of my skin. I hustled her to ops, trying not to show how freaked I was, but I have to say, I was really happy when we left that area that night. This is the last one I'll tell, and it's probably the weirdest story I have. Now, I don't know if this is true in every SAR unit, but in mine it's sort of an unspoken, regular thing we run into. You can try asking about it with other SAR officers, but even if they know what you're talking about, they probably won't say anything about it. We've been told not to talk about it by our superiors, and at this point we've all gotten so used to not to that it doesn't even seem weird anymore. On just about every case where we're really far into the wilderness, I'm talking 30 or 40 miles at some point, we'll find a staircase in the middle of the woods. It's almost like if you took the stairs in your house, cut them out and put them in the forest. I asked about it the first time I saw some, and the other officers just told me not to worry about it. That it was normal. Everyone I asked said the same thing. I wanted to go check them out, but I was told very empathetically that I should never go near any of them. I just sort of ignore them now when I run into them, because it happens so frequently. I have a lot of more stories, and I suppose if anyone's interested, I'll tell some of them tomorrow. If anyone has any theories about the stairs, or if you've seen them too, let me know. I've heard and read a lot of stories about the stairs in the woods, but I've yet to encounter some. If any of you out there have ever seen some of those stairs, please Write me your experience in the comments. The next story is called My Scariest Encounter Was on a Hike in the Swiss Alps. This happened in 2019. I've always been an avid hiker, and when I hear about the beautiful trails in the Swiss Alps, I knew I had to go, so I packed my bags and set off on my adventure. The first few days were amazing, the views were breathtaking, and I felt like I was in a postcard. I had the trails all to myself, and I was loving every minute of it, but as I was hiking deeper into the mountains, I started to feel like I was being followed. The trail was deserted, and I had not seen any other hikers for hours, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. I kept turning around to see if anyone was behind me, but there was never anyone. I tried to tell myself that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, but the feeling persisted. I started to feel paranoid and anxious, my heart racing with fear. I was so focused on the feeling of being followed that I didn't even notice the beauty of the mountains anymore. The feeling became even stronger as the day went on, and I started to hear strange noises behind me. At first I thought it was just wind, but as I turned around I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, standing on the trail behind me, were 3 creatures. They were unlike anything I've ever seen before. They were tall and thin, with elongated limbs and heads that seemed too large for their bodies. Their skin was slick, grey, and their eyes were black and soulless. I froze, unsure of what to do. The creatures just stood there staring at me. I pulled my phone out to take a picture of them, but as soon as I did, they started running towards me, and it made me panic. I lost my balance, fell on the ground, losing my phone in the process. I knew I had to get away fast, so I got up and started running as fast as I could. I ran out of what felt like hours, but I couldn't shake them. Every time I looked back over my shoulder, I saw that creatures were following me. They were always there, just behind me, their elongated limbs allowing them to keep pace with ease. I was terrified, and I didn't know what to do. After a while I stumbled upon what looked like an abandoned bunker deep in the mountains. I had heard that there were many bunkers made by the Swiss army in the Alps, but I never thought I would find one. I pushed open the rusty door, and as soon as I stepped inside, chills went down my spine. The walls were covered in carvings depicting the same creatures that were following me. I knew that I was not the first person to see these creatures. A tunnel went further into the mountain, but it was pitch black inside of it, and I decided to stay within the first room. Old planks and empty beer cans were scattered on the floor. I barricaded the door and huddled in a corner, trying to catch my breath. But I could still hear them outside, rustling in the bushes. I peeked out a small opening in the wall and saw that they were hiding behind the trees, watching the bunker. They would occasionally poke their heads out, their black eyes staring at me. This went on for the whole night, and I was too scared to sleep. In the morning, the creatures were still there, lurking outside the bunker. I knew that I couldn't stay there forever, so I decided to explore deeper into the bunker. I walked down the dark and damp corridor, feeling my way with my hands, touching the walls using old rotten broom as my guide. As I walked, I felt as if someone was watching me, but I knew it couldn't have been the creatures, as I would probably have heard them destroy the barricaded door of the bunker. I finally reached the end of the corridor, opened the door to a large room. Inside, I felt something hanging on my right. I I couldn't quite tell what it was. Could be clothes, maybe in uniform, or old rags, but I felt a metal helmet. It was clearly a helmet. And on my left I felt a machine. I couldn't tell what it was, but I heard a soft humming noise coming from it. I reached out blindly, trying to find the source of the noise, and my hand landed on a switch. I flipped it on and the machine came to life. Suddenly, the room was flooded with light and blinded me for a second. I could see this room also had carvings against the wall, just like the other ones I had seen previously. Even though the room looked odd and creepy, the fact that it wasn't pitch black anymore was somewhat relieving. There was a greenish door leading further into the bunker, and I noticed that the machine also triggered lights in the corridor that led me to this room. I turned around and got scared for a second when I saw the old army uniform hanging from the wall. It looked damp and moldy, as if it had been here for decades. I was starting to feel lightheaded, which was probably normal. After all, I hadn't slept for over a day, and the only food I had eaten was a local chocolate-coated wafer bar and a small sausage. I didn't pack a lot of food as there were small villages or rest stops everywhere in the Alps, and I had plans to sleep at a hotel the night prior. I was wondering if they tried to contact me or alerted the authorities. Maybe a search party was looking for me, but there was no way they would find me in this bunker. I sat down on the ground and leaned against the wall, trying to gather my thoughts and come up with a plan. As I sat there, I noticed a shadow on the wall, coming from the entrance corridor. At first, I thought I was hallucinating, but no, it wasn't. It was moving. It was them. The creatures that had been following me were now inside the bunker. I quickly got up and slammed the door shut, which, luckily, could be closed from the inside. As soon as I did, I heard them rustling towards the door. I turned to the other door, but it was locked. I was trapped, with the creatures closing in on me. I could hear them scratching at the door, their elongated limbs reaching through the cracks. I remember thinking, this is it. This is how I die. I knew that I was going to die there, alone in that bunker in a foreign country. But then I remembered the old Swiss Army uniform hanging from a mannequin. For some reason, my survival instinct kept making me look at that uniform. Was it because uniforms have a sense of authority? Was it because of its rotten smell? Was I going crazy? I don't know. I quickly put on that uniform and grabbed the helmet, hoping it would give me some protection if the creatures attacked me. The creatures broke through the wall and I braced myself for the worst, but as they approached me, they suddenly stopped. They stared at me for a moment, then I turned and fled back into the wilderness as if they were scared. I never found out why they didn't attack me, but I was just glad to be alive. I quickly made my way back to civilization, but until today I never spoke of those creatures I had encountered. I knew no one was gonna believe me anyway, and I didn't want to be known as the crazy hiker who claimed to have been followed by monsters. And what a creepy story, and whether it's true or not, I leave that up for you to decide. The next story is called Don't Go Camping Alone, Ever. I ain't scared of nothing. That's what I yelled to my brother as I slammed the door of my car shut. Things have changed since then. I've changed. I remember his smirk, how he held out my jacket, the way he spouted off an endless list of things I should be scared of, skinwalkers and witches and werewolves, oh my. He presented each one as reason after reason of why this idea was stupid, saying I still had time to flake out. Save face. I remember rolling my eyes, snatching my jacket from his grasp, sliding into my car and yelling that I'm not scared before speeding away towards the darkening outline of the mountains. They stood out stark against the setting sun, like teeth. Boy, how I wish I'd listened. I was wrong, he was right. I'm fucking scared. Let me back up a bit. It all started about 2 days ago. I was out of my mind, depressed, could barely get out of bed. Thought about chucking myself in front of cars, over bridges, off buildings, just dying. I thought about dying all the time, and enough was enough. One of the few friends I had suggested that I try solo camping said it might clear my head, that the wilderness, the silence, the solitude would do me good. He gave me a list of spots, some more isolated than others. I decided on the most isolated one, which was about a 3-hour hike from the last campsite, far out in the Rocky Mountain National Forest. I remember his face, the surprise, the acceptance. You sure? His voice cracked. I nodded, saying nothing. Okay, I mean, it's a pretty secluded place, especially for a first-time camper. He shrugged. But then again, it's a beautiful spot. It'll definitely give me some perspective. And the night sky out there is insane. I thanked him and turned to leave, but he spoke up again. Hey, don't let the forest spook you, okay? A word of advice from a veteran. Don't go out at night, no matter what you hear. You might get totally fucked by a bear or lion. The drive up the mountains was strangely soothing. The gently curving roads that wove their way through the trees and up the rocks were exciting to navigate. And soon my mind was eased into a peaceful contemplation. I had decided to forego electronics for this trip, even going as far as securing my phone in a glove box. I wanted to be completely free of all that shit, able to focus on the now rather ruminate about the past or fear of the future. I would be gone for 5 days and 4 nights, enough time for me to hopefully recuperate and reassess my life and what I was going to do with it. I soon descended into Estes Park and drove through the picturesque town towards RMNP, willing myself not to stay at the Stanley instead. I found the entrance to the park with ease and continued to the closest lot of my campsite. Night was now falling, and I silently cursed myself for leaving so late. I sat in my car for a good 30 minutes before deciding that it would be too risky hiking 3 hours in near pitch black. There were 4 other tents set up in the lot, and I was with room for one more, and soon I had my own tent set up. That night passed comfortably. I was surrounded by chatting, laughing people, unruly but happy children who ran round and round screaming. A few of them offered me roasted hot dogs and s'mores and beers, and I filled my belly, smiling. I was rolled up in my sleeping bag before the last light from the dying embers faded away. The second night didn't go so smoothly. I woke up late, well rested but still groggy, and took my time repacking my tent. I hesitated at first, wondering if I should just stay there, but at 3 p.m. another family showed up with proof they had reserved the site, so I gathered my things and set off, and immediately got lost. Navigating by map and compass for the first time and alone is a lot harder than it sounds. And the trees can be misleading, can turn you around, make you think you're on the right path when really you're miles from where you're supposed to be. Instead of taking me 3 hours to get to the site, it took me nearly twice the time, and I was swiftly losing what little light was left in the day. Finally I found the site, but before I breathed the sigh of relief, I hastily set up my tent, building a small fire in front. It was dark now, and I was jumpy. Every sound I heard was seemingly magnified, every shadow cast by the dim light of the fire. A menace spooked. I crawled into the tent and curled up in my bed, trying to will myself into sleep. After a while I was dozing, about to drift off, when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of foot crunching outside. My eyes opened and I reached for my flashlight, but it didn't turn on. I waited. I heard the sound again. Someone or something was definitely walking around my tent. It sounded like whatever they was trying to be quiet, stealthy. That went on for hours in inconsistent bursts until I finally decided it was an animal scavenging for the scraps or inspecting my tent. By dawn, I was dozing again, and the noise had finally stopped. I told myself I would sleep for an hour or two, giving myself time to rest up. I woke up disoriented, exhausted, and started to panic before remembering I was out camping and that I needed to start hiking back. But when I exited the tent, I saw the sun was already settling. To say I was upset would have been an understatement. I hesitated for a moment, trying to decide what to do. I wanted to go home. I wanted to leave, see how far I could get out there. But deep down I knew I'd instantly get lost and probably end up in a worse situation. So I began to collecting as much wood and brush I could to build a big ass fire and prepared to hunker down for the night. The light from the sun seemed to disappear faster than usual. The third night was pretty problematic. I sat awake in my tent for hours after the sun went down, waiting. I'd left the fire going for as long as the wood lasted. I know this isn't kosher for camping, but I was improvising and I was absolutely terrified. The darkness around me seemed to crush the light from the fire, making it seem small, pathetic, a tiny candle in a sea of shadows. For hours I sat there, listening, afraid. Finally I realized I was just being ridiculous, that what I heard the night before was nothing to fear, that my subconscious, my monkey mind, was just playing tricks on me, keeping me alert for no reason. So I bundled up and laid down, and I heard it, softly at first, a footstep, then 2, 3, growing louder, bolder. I sat up and I felt my eyes increase to the size of saucers, and my breath quickened. What was that? I had to know. I wasn't thinking, I was operating purely off fear. I heard the noise. It sounded like something running around my tent. Suddenly, the side of my tent pushed in, as if someone was slapping it from outside. "Hey!" I yelled, scared out of my wits. "Hey, I'm awake. I'm in here." I tried to stand, tripping myself up in the sleeping bag in the process, and slammed into the front of the tent, scrambling up. I swiftly unzipped the flap and ran outside with a red-tinted flashlight. I saw a shape scurry away and followed. And there, standing at the edge of the firelight, barely visible, was the silhouette of a person. They were standing with their backs towards me. Their arms were hanging in a strange position by their sides. The head pointed straight away from me. I took a step towards them and a branch cracked underneath me. The sound seemed to startle the person and they turned their head ever so slightly. "Hey," I said again, "what the fuck, man?" And it boiled up, a sound that crescendoed into a scream. It was laughter and it echoed around me, rattling around my skull. I ran leaping into my tent, zipping it up behind me, curling into my sleeping bag crying. And the world around me exploded, or rather imploded. The walls of the tent shook like hundreds of hands were slapping it, poking it, punching it. Outside, what sounded like a dozen of people running around shattered the silence. I don't know how or when I fell asleep. I think I fainted. Either way, I woke up the next day to a reddish glow encompassing my surroundings. I I sat up and ran outside, looking around for proof of what I heard, but there was nothing. No footprints, no handprints, or any disturbance at all. "Fuck this," I muttered, throwing my things chaotically into my bag. I would leave today, in the dark. I couldn't stay another night. I was just starting to uphold the tent when I heard a sound in the distance, perhaps carried to me by the wind which was picking up around me. Help me, please, oh God, help me." I reached more out of instinct than logic and began running towards the sound before realizing that I, in no way, was in a place to help whoever was screaming. Still, I tried to locate the source of the sound, following the voice for about 30 minutes. "Where are you?" I yelled, looking around through the maze of trees. "I'm here. Where are you?" Quickly, the screams descended into a deep, unsettling laughter. Scared out of my mind, I turned and ran back the way I came. By some miracle, I made it back to my side, grabbed my pack, and uprooted the poles of the tent, thinking that I would just roll it up and carry it back instead of taking the time to fold it neatly and shove it into this bag. Around me, the mountains loomed up like fangs, like I was about to be swallowed whole by a monstrous mouth. As I pulled each pole, the tent fell a little bit, but it was only on the third pole out of 6 that I realized it wasn't falling fully flat. Confused, I peered into the tent and reeled in horror, too afraid to even scream. There was someone sitting inside, but not just anyone. It was me sitting there, pallor and bone thin, and 2 wide grins plastered on my face. A single droplet of blood rolled down from each eye, which, instead of having green irises, were totally wholly black. I jumped back, tripping over my own feet. Laughter rose around me, and as I scrambled up, I saw my hand that was not my hand reach out from the tent, followed swiftly by the other, then the head. My face that was not my face looked up at me, still smiling, then laughed again. I screamed, I stood, I ran, and I ran. I didn't even know if I was running the right way, but I couldn't even use the sun anymore for guidance since it had almost fully set. I ran without looking where I was going. I kept looking behind me to see if that thing was following me. I could feel the trees scratching me up, pushing against me, like they were trying to hold me back, hold me still, until that thing came for me. Suddenly, a light flashed in my face and I ran into something solid, something black, something that wrapped around me. I instantly cowered, hiding my face in my hands. Shit. Oh please God, no. I heard my own voice, terrified, shaking. Hey, calm down, it's okay. You just scared me. Calm down, what's wrong? I looked up into the worried grey eyes of a human face. The face of a middle-aged man, to be exact. He was holding me up. The flashlight he was using lay fallen at our feet, creating strange shadows behind us. I looked back, fearful of what I might see, but there was nothing, only trees swinging slowly in the light breeze. Hey, he said again. Was that you, screaming? I came out here to check. I couldn't speak, I was too terrified. I shook my head. Were you camping out here alone? He asked, letting me go and bending down to retrieve the flashlight. I nodded, then began crying. Hey, it's okay. It can be spooky out here. Come on, my car's right over there. He gestured with his head back behind me. I wiped my nose and blinked, finally finding my voice. Who are you? He glanced at me, then away. I'm a park ranger. But he didn't look like one. He was wearing a smooth black suit, black tie, and white shirt, and his shoes were polished leather, not hiking boots. Come on, he said again, taking my pack and swinging it onto his back. As he did so, his jacket flapped slightly, and I saw what looked like a 6-hour handgun strapped to his belt. "Okay," I said, looking back behind me again. "How did you find me?" He shrugged. "Good hearing?" We entered a small clearing and saw a matte black SUV with tinted windows, headlights flashing, engine idling, parked in the middle of it. He popped the trunk and threw my bag in as I climbed into the passenger side seat. He climbed in the driver's seat and asked me where he should take me. I told him the lot number and we were on our way. After a few moments, he flipped the cubby between us open and pulled out a bag. "Corn nuts?" he asked, holding out the bag to me. I took it gratefully and began jumping away. I licked my fingers, then looked back at him. "So, are you really a ranger?" He looked at me, then back to the road, but still I stared at him, transfixed. He looked exhausted, his wood-colored hair disheveled and dirty from the forest. The SUV jerked to a sudden stop, and the man let out a slow, low breath. His eyes narrowed and he looked over me, then back on the dirt trail in front of us. I followed his gaze, feeling the fear churning up inside me. And there in the middle of the road was me. The me that was not me. Its limbs hung limply, as if they were broken, and the sickly smile was still plastered across the face. It waved. The man looked back at me, then back at the thing that was not me, then back at me. I met his gaze. "I don't get paid enough for this shit," the man muttered before slamming his foot on the accelerator, straight towards that thing. We both felt the impact and the car bounced over the body, and the man kept driving. But around us, in between the trees, stirred into darkness, laughter boiled up, manic, persistent. We reached the lot in silence, bathed in the first light of the rising sun. The man beside me seemed to be deep in thought, distracted. I was still scared, but hopefully that whatever that thing was, it was now dead, crushed by a car, or at least so badly wounded that it would soon succumb. The SUV slowed down to a stop and a man popped the trunk and hopped out. He walked to the back and grabbed my pack as I jumped out. He handed it to me and I took it, and thanked him for everything. "No problem," he said. "All in a day's or night's work." His lips quivered as if he was about to smile. I turned to leave, but he spoke up again. "Hey." I turned to him again. "If you ever want to talk about what you saw, or, just talk, call me." He held out a card. I took it and looked down at it. It was matte black and only had a single number written on it. There was no area code. Then I began, but I heard the door slam and looked up. The man was already back in his car. He waved at me, then sped off back the way he came, back towards that thing. I shoved the card in my pocket, climbed into my car, and left breathing a sigh of relief. I still haven't told anyone about what happened. Even when they asked why I refused to go camping ever again, I just shrug and tell them that it wasn't my thing, that I preferred a warm bed and the bustling sounds of a busy city. Every so often, though, I pull out the card, my fingers lingering over my phone, wondering if I should call, wondering who the man really was and if he'd really be able to explain what happened to me. Yellowstone National Park. This story I'm about to tell, only a few people close to me have ever heard. However, I never actually explained in detail what happened that night to absolutely anyone. For this story specifically, it is necessary to explain my general area I live in, as it pertains to this event. I live next door to Yellowstone National Park, which in of itself has drawn millions of tourists each year. Part of the reason I'm writing this is merely a warning to people who decide to visit during the summer month. Last year, in the summer of 2020, me and some of my buddies decided to go have a night out and do some camping out near a spot we've been to multiple times in the past. After all, this was right after things started to become normal again and lockdowns were lifted. I decided to head up to the camp spot early in an effort to make sure my gear was still set up from earlier that day. I did this as an effort to reserve the spot as it's first come first served. Therefore, with everything in hand, I left my house right before sunset. We were all supposed to meet up within an hour, so I didn't really have any concerns of being by myself. I began with my 30-minute drive up the location. When I finally arrived, I immediately noticed my tent and everything inside was gone. Now, just for some context, I staked the tent down in multiple areas just to be sure it stayed for the period I was gone. Inside was my sleeping bag and a few other miscellaneous items I left just to keep it weighed down. However, everything, literally everything, disappeared as if it was never there. I looked around and even the stakes and rocks I placed on the outside were missing. I immediately knew something was wrong because I did not see any campers on the way up. Also, keep in mind, I do not have cell service as it's a couple miles back into the wilderness. I then decided to drive back down from where I came to get service and get a hold of my friends and let them know what happened. Needless to say, I was not happy with the situation and knew that whoever took my belongings was still in the area, as it only has been for an hour or two. However, my friends insisted that I would stay and at least hang out for a few hours, as it took weeks of planning. So once I made sure everyone arrived, I then decided to go around the area and search for any sign of footprints or indicators that maybe these people were close by. As you can guess, I wasn't able to find anything. I eventually played it off and decided I would just look for it in the morning and contact the Forrest service to report it missing. I also didn't want to ruin the party for everyone and decided to stay. In hindsight, this was by far one of the worst decisions I could have made. As the night went on, everything seemed fine, so I thought. Around 1 or 2 in the morning, most of my friends decided to call it a night. I ended up sleeping in my truck. This was perhaps one of the better decisions that I made that night. That, along with always making sure to bring my bear spray and cider for protection from unexpected guests, I eventually fell asleep. However, it's important to note that I was still a bit on edge, as only a couple hours before all of my belongings were taken. I decided to leave my window rolled down a bit, just in case I heard anything creep up on us. After about 2 hours of me being asleep, my worst nightmare came true. At first I just heard something moving around outside of our camp. This was enough noise to wake me up, and I immediately froze and didn't move whatsoever. Therefore, this was partially because I knew whatever was making the noise was large, not just a raccoon or any smaller creature. I then was paralyzed, just listening intently to whatever was happening outside of our camp. My first thought was that it was a bear. We also had sightings recently in the area. At one point, I swear I could have been only maybe 20 or 30 yards away. Also, another key point I noticed was that there was absolutely no other noise. Usually there's grasshoppers or birds, but it was complete and utter silence. Now in the wilderness, that's never a good sign. It means there's a large predator or something of its kind in the area. Meanwhile, it's pitch black outside and our fire had completely gone out. After about 50 minutes of not hearing anything, I decided I just needed to stop being paranoid. But just as I was about to fall back asleep, I saw something to the right of our campsite. It was just a few yards away from our fire pit and probably about 20 yards away from me. To my absolute horror, it was a person. I immediately freaked. This was no average person either, let alone the fact that it's 3 or 4 in the morning and you're in someone's campsite. This person was wearing what I made out to be some kind of mask. I got a very good look at it and it turned out to be a deer skull. They were wearing black robe and that's about all I noticed. I sure didn't want to leave my truck and confront this person, so I did what I thought was best. I turned my truck on and began honking the horn until all my friends were awake. I rolled down the window and told them we need to get out of here, immediately. After seeing what I saw, then did exactly that. Meanwhile, this person hasn't moved, mind you. Just as I thought it was bad, the situation got even worse. More of these figures began appearing in front of us through the trees, wearing the same outfit as I mentioned earlier, but with a multiple of different masks. I immediately put my truck in reverse and began speeding away. They began walking closer and closer. Luckily, I was able to drive out of this spot in time. As I began speeding down the road out of there, 3 more of these figures appeared out from the side of my truck. This time with a dog and way more aggressive than the previous ones I saw. They began throwing rocks and stones at my truck and chasing after me. At one point they were literally right next to my passenger window until I accelerated even more and eventually lost them. As I looked back in my mirror, I saw only one figure left, just simply peeking and staring at me behind a tree. This image is forever shared in my head. From this night on, I refused to ever go back there. I've never ever spoken to anyone. Even when I was around my friends that experienced this, we never mentioned it to each other. It's been over a year now since this happened, and well, all I can say is that I believe these people were in some sort of cult. I heard other stories about similar events happening, and even cattle completely disappearing. It's very barbaric, and you wouldn't think that such beautiful national park that attracts so many people a year round would have such dark and disturbing secrets. My advice to anyone that decides to travel to those mysterious and preserved parks of instinct beauty would be to always bring protection of some kind. Likewise, make sure you let others know about your plans and never go alone. There are hundreds of missing persons reported across the national parks inside the United States, and I could have very well been one of them if I had stayed just a few minutes longer. Nature has its way to attract very different types of people. Some want to explore and push themselves to their limits, meanwhile, some simply don't want to be seen and lurk in the darkness of night. A former Green Beret once told me the key to survival was always being aware of your surroundings and listening to your instincts. If a particular situation doesn't feel right, chances are it's not. Stay safe, everyone. That was surely a creepy story, and to be honest, you don't expect that when you venture out into the beauty of those national parks. The next story is called I Have Hunted These Woods for Years. This was the first time they hunted back. I've hunted that patch of timber for most of my life. Not the romantic version, the real one. Permission slips, a rusted gate with the chain everyone pretends works, and a stand I built out of pressure-treated boards that are starting to warp because I never sealed the ends right. It's mixed hardwood and an old pine plantation behind a hayfield, a creek on the far side, cattails and low spots, the kind of place deer cut through when the wind is right and the acorns are down. The morning the wind was wrong. Not wrong for hunting, wrong like the air didn't want to move at all. Late season, cold had the metal of my rifle biting through my gloves. I climbed up before first light, settled in and did the usual, phone off, thermos out, breath slow. I expect the woods didn't go their part. No squirrel shuffled in the leaves, no woodpecker, no geese overhead. Even the creek sounded muted, like it was running under a lid. Quiet can be nice. This wasn't nice. It felt held, like something was listening and everything else was already knew to shut up. Around 6:40 I heard the first sound, not a step, a drag, slow and steady, the sound of something heavy being pulled through damp leaves. It came from my right, deeper in the pines. I leaned forward, carefully not to bump the rail, and tried to catch movement between trunks. Nothing. The dragging stopped. I waited. Then it started again, closer, the rhythm unchanged. Drag, 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 like a rope sliding across ground. I tried to talk myself into deer with a bad leg. I've seen them hobble. I've seen them survive broad heads and busted shoulders. Deer are stubborn like that. Still, this didn't sound like a limp. It sounded like something being hauled. The sky lightened until the trees took shape. My breath came out in thin white pulse. I was watching the creek line when another voice cut in, low and quick. A click pattern, light, rhythmic, not birds, not squirrels. It came from the ground. Then it stopped, like whoever made it was checking how far it carried. I didn't move, my legs were already going numb in that slow stand way, and I didn't care. A little after 7, something finally stepped out to the narrow stripe of open ground along the creek. A buck, 8-point, not a monster but solid. Thick neck, decent antlers, the kind you would be happy with on a normal day. It stood there for a long second, head angled like it was listening to something I couldn't hear. Then it took one step and dragged itself hind leg behind it. Not a normal drag, the hoof didn't lift at all. It carved a straight line through the leaves like someone had pulled a stick. The leg itself looked wrong, not just injured, wrong. The joint didn't sit where it should. The angle was off, like the limb had been put back on without caring how it fit. The buck turns its head. Its eyes were flat, too dark, no depth, like painted glass. I should have let it walk. I know that now, but sitting in that frozen silence, watching something finally step out, my brain did what brains do. It tried to make it normal. It's hurt, put it down, clean. So I brought the rifle up and settled the crosshair behind the shoulder. The buck stopped, then it looked up. Not a casual glance, not scanning the tree line. It looked right at my stand, at me. I squeezed the trigger, the shot cracked and rolled out across the field. Recoil thumped my shoulder. In the scope I saw the buck jerk and then fold. It went down like it had been unplugged. For a split second, relief hit me. A clean shot relief, the end of tension. Then the woods went emptier, not just quiet, hollow. Like every small animal sound got vacuumed out at once. I watched the buck through the scope, waiting for the chest to stop moving. Its head lifted, slowly, smoothly, controlled. Not the panic lift, a wounded animal, more like something testing the body's hinges. Its mouth opened a little. That clicking started again, louder. It didn't sound like teeth chattering. It sounded wet, throaty, like something inside the neck was working. Then the buck stood. It pushed up on 3 legs. The dragged leg came up last, stiff, and sat down sideways, as if the joints above didn't exist. It swayed once, steadied, and turned toward the creek. Drag, like the shot didn't matter. I lowered the rifle a fraction, trying to keep my brain from skipping. Maybe I'd missed, maybe recoil made me think I hit, but I watched it drop. I saw the impact. I tracked it again, looking harder for blood. There was none. Not on the leaves, not on the sides. Not a drop. Just a neat dark puncture in the fur, where the bullet should have opened it up. A clean little hole, too clean. The buck reached the creek and paused, half in shadow, half in pale morning light. Then it looked back at me, and it blinked. A slow, full-lit blink, deliberate, like someone answering a question without words. My hands went cold around the stock. The buck slid down into the cattails. The reed swallowed it. The dragging sound continued for a few seconds, then stopped. I sat there like an idiot, rifle stick-shouldered, waiting for the world to turn normal again. That's when I felt movement behind me. Not on the ground, in the tree. A subtle vibration through the trunk. My platform shivered once, like weight shifted against its bark. Then I heard a scraping directly below my boots, slow upward, like something pulling itself along the tree. I leaned over and looked between the boards. 15 feet down, the base of the oak was shadowed. Leaves, old sticks, nothing obvious. Then something pale slid in. A limb, too long, too thin, jointed wrong, skin slick, in patches, like something that spent most of its life wet. It touched the bark and climbed, not grabbing like a bear, not hopping like a squirrel. It stuck and pulled, quiet and efficient, a scrape matching the motion. A wet inhale sound, close, too close, like something breathing through a throat full of water. The tree shivered again, and the buck's clicking returned, but not from the creek, from the pines behind me. A signal. Something answered from below. A deep clack, like two hard surfaces meeting. My safe height stopped feeling safe. I went for the ladder, climbed down fast, boots slipping on the metal rugs, hands clumsy from the cold and the sudden rush in my head. Halfway down, something hit my stand above me. The whole structure rattled. A board creaked, like it might crack. I looked up without meaning to. A shape was posed on my platform, hunched low, like it didn't want to silhouette itself against the sky. Narrow body, ribs visible under thick skin. A head long and flat like a lizard's, but heavier at the jaw, wrong in the proportions. It tilted its head slowly, curious. Then it dropped off the platforms towards the trunk. I didn't wait. I jumped the last 5 feet. I hit hard, knees buckling, pain snapping up my shin. Leaves puffled around my boots. I ran towards the field because the truck was in there, and because open ground feels safer, even when it isn't. Behind me, the scrape on the bark sped up, then stopped. Then came a different sound, low, quick, like something moving over the ground on too many points of contact. Not footsteps, a sliding gallop. I burst into the field's edge, frozen roots, grabbed my boots. The truck sat near the gate, 200 yards away, and it might as well have been across the river. I sprinted. Halfway there, the air began to get tense, like something big moved into my wake. A shadow crossed the ground beside me. I didn't look. Something raked my back. Sharp points tore through my jacket and into my skin. Pain flashed white. My breath cut off. My legs stumbled. I hit the dirt, palms burning, and slid in my frozen mud. My rifle skittered away. I rolled onto the side and saw it in full. Out in the open. And I didn't care. Long, slow build speed. Skin ridged like plates in places, stretched thin in others. Along its sides were folds that opened and closed with each breath, wet, dark red like gills. When it shifted, smaller limbs tucked under its chest flashed into view, then disappeared again, helping it move in short, brutal bursts. Its head was flat and triangular jaw, hinging wider than it should. Teeth weren't clean and rose like a wolf. They were thin spikes set back like a fish, made for holding and not letting go. Saliva thread between them and dotted the dirt. It clicked once, then it repeated the bug's pattern, like it was mocking what it had already set in motion. And from that tree line behind it, the dragging sound returned, slow, steady, followed by cattails rustling where cattails shouldn't have been in a field. The buck was coming out. The deer was never the prize, it was a flag. I grabbed the rifle and dragged it to me, dirt packed into the action. I worked the bolt hard, jammed around in, and aimed at the creature's head. It didn't flinch. It lowered itself slightly, like a cat about to spring. The gills folded, pulsed. I fired. The bullet hit it square in the chest. It jerked, barely. A muscle twitch? No stumble, no panic. It opened its mouth wider and pushed out a wet, vibrating rasp, like air forced through the pipe full of water. Then it launched. It covered the distance in a blur. Weight hit my legs, knocked them out. I slammed into dirt, the world tightening. Something hooked into my shoulder, claw, tooth, I don't know, anchoring me. I screamed and swung the rifle like a club. The stock cracked against something hard. The creature's head snapped sideways. Its jaws clamped onto the barrel. Metal groaned under pressure. I felt vibration through the gun, like it was biting through my bones. I kicked hard, here connecting with its sides where those where folds moved. It twitched and released with a popping sound. I rolled and tried to get up. I raked my back again, deeper. Hot lines opened across my ribs. My shirt stuck immediately. I staggered towards the truck anyway, half running, half falling. This time it followed at a walk. It didn't need to sprint. It knew what it had done to me. In my peripheral vision, the buck finally stepped into the field, dragging that wrong leg, head bobbing like something tucked on a string attached to its spine. The two of them clicked in overlapping rhythms, a conversation. I fumbled the keys out of my pocket with my fingers that didn't want to work, dropped them once, found them in the dirt with my numb hands and luck. I yanked the driver's door open. The creature hit the side of the truck, not hard enough to flip it, hard enough to dent. The whole vehicle rocked. Its face pressed close to the window, up close. The eyes were wrong, in a way my brain keeps replaying. No clear pupil, just dark, wet surface with a faint oil sheen. It clicked right against the glass. The truck cranked slow because cold had it by its throat. For half second, nothing happened, and my mind went straight to the dumbest, simplest ending. A dead battery. Then the engine caught. I slammed into reverse and floored it. Tires spun, grabbed, spray frozen dirt. The creature slid back a step, didn't fall, just gave me space. I swung the truck around, punched for the gate. The mirror, it walked after me a few paces and stopped. The buck stood in the field, dragging, watching my taillights. They didn't chase, they didn't need to. It didn't feel like they'd failed to kill me. It felt like I'd been tested. I drove straight to the ER because my back was wet and my shirt was glued to me. Every bump on the road made the scratches flare. In triage, I lied. I told them I slipped climbing down and caught my back on an old barbed wire at the field edge. I said fast, like if I didn't slow down, nobody would ask me, to make it make sense. The nurse didn't believe the story, not fully, but she didn't argue. She cut my shirt off and the air on my skin made me seem white. 5 long rakes down my right side, parallel, deep enough to show pink beneath. Smaller punctures near my shoulder, like something had hooked. Animal? She asked, already reaching for a saline bottle. I didn't see it, I said. That was true, and it wasn't. She asked if I wanted them to call anyone, police, animal control, fish and wildlife, whoever you call when you show up bleeding and you're not making eye contact. I shook my head too fast. No, please, just want it clean. They cleaned it, stitched it, what needed stitches, antibiotics, tetanus, the boring medical stuff that keeps you alive. They asked if it was a bear. I said I didn't see a bear. 2 days later, I went back in daylight with my cousin because I needed my rifle, and because I needed to prove to myself there was a rational explanation hiding in plain sight. We found the rifle in the field with the stock snapped and dirt packed into the action. We found my boot prints and the long slide where I'd hit the ground. We found the stand still strapped to oak, but at the base of the tree, in the mud, we found the drag marks, and beside it a pattern of impressions like the edge of a shovel passed into the ground in repeating lines, moving in a straight path towards the creek. My cousin stared at it for a long time without talking. Neither of us said the word dear. We left. That night, I hung my torn jacket on a chair because I couldn't bring myself to put it back in the closet. The bag was shredded where the claws had found me. Dried blood had turned the lining stiff. I slept in short, stupid bursts, waking every time I shifted and my back pulled. Sometime after 2 a.m., my dog stood in the hallway, staring at the front door, not barking, not growling, just staring like he'd been called. I got up and listened. At first nothing, then a sound from the porch. No footsteps, a slow drag across wood like something being pulled, and the same deliberate pattern, a faint but unmistakable, coming through the door, like someone tapping 2 pebbles together just outside. I didn't open the door, I didn't even get close. I stood there in the dark holding my beer while my dog kept staring. And then, very softly, something scraped along the bottom edge of the door, like a blunt nail testing a seal. In the morning I found proof that made my stomach drop. 3 shallow gouges in the porch, directly in front of my door, parallel and evenly spaced, like someone had dragged the edge of a tool across it. Impressed into the dried mud on my doormat was a straight line, clean and smooth, like a hoof that never lifted. No tracks leading away, just the mark, aimed at my threshold. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed that video, make sure to like and follow the channel, and I'll see you next time.